Tales of Unterra. Seeking Refuge. The continent of Unterra, Neverfall, east of the Deadwood. Year 47 SB. Pola Stoneface. Pola awoke gradually from yet another restless night, her senses building slowly before tumbling over one another in a rush of consciousness. Her head pounded along to the beat of the cart as it bounced against the stones that regularly protruded from the derelict dirt path. Most that came this way travelled via the thirst route, but the Stonefaces didn't have the coin to squander on a boat or raft. Instead, their rickety old tumbril hauled the five of them alongside the banks and meanders of the river. Pushing herself upright on the splintered bench, Pola brushed the last of the sleep from her eyes. Her youngest, Samuel, lay in peaceful sleep atop the few belongings they had managed to bring with them, a coarse grain sack pulled against his chin. His older sister, Millie, sat curled against a crate beside him, hands wrapped around her knees. The hollow, sorrowful look in her eyes ripped a chasm through Pola's heart. Unlike her brother, she was old enough to fully understand what it meant to leave their home behind. Never again would she race her friends through the stalls of the farmer's market, or collect raspberries with her fathers from the forest edge, or sit on the cool stone steps of their old farmhouse, watching the warm sun burst over the walls of Deadwood. Pola placed an open palm against the swell of her belly, feeling a soft kick from within. A year ago, they would have stayed, but with a new child on the way, the risk was unthinkable. Life would continue as usual for a while, but as wells ran dry and crops went unwatered, Pola knew that people would panic, friends would turn against each other, and families would be torn apart. The city would die. It had been her family's home for generations, and she had made the decision to leave. Her husbands didn't question the choice, didn't even try to talk her into staying. The cart was packed, the horse fed and watered, and they had all left before daybreak. She looked at them now, a week into the trip, and felt a warm wave of gratitude. Both sat in the front of the cart, Philip slouched and sleeping against his spouse, his tousled ginger hair falling across his pale, freckled brow, and a faint smile pulling at the corners of his drooling mouth. Ralph's intelligent eyes surveyed the road ahead, ringed in tired shadows. Even with his lack of sleep, his olive hands gripped steadily on the reins. Her and Philip were used to hard, physical labour on the farm, but they always rewarded themselves with a nice long rest. Ralph, on the other hand, would spend sleepless nights fussing over a gadget or gizmo, his fingers whirring over mechanical devices she could never understand, though he had explained them all 1,000 times. The three of them were all so different, and yet they fit together like the pieces of a jigsaw, completing one another. She stood and began edging towards the front of the cart, observing her surroundings from her new vantage point. Farmland stretched out behind them to the west, a patchwork quilt reaching towards the horizon. Ahead loomed a hilly moor, fog hanging between the hills like a web. "I thought we were heading around the moors," Pola questioned, her voice still raspy from sleep. Ralph's face didn't move, but she spotted the telltale twinkle of a smile in his eyes at the sound of her voice. "We were," he responded, "but we passed through Wormroot whilst you were out, and the folks there reckon the king's up the tolls again. We barely have enough coin for more food, let alone to cross both bridges." She sat on the front seat, pinning him between Philip and herself, and rested a hand on his thigh. The moor would shave 2 days off the journey. If they kept up a good pace, they might even arrive in Edgewater before sundown. But the moors were dangerous. All manner of beasts roamed these mists, not to mention the creatures that were known to crawl out of the ground, intent on stealing life and valuables from unprotected travellers. Ralph caught the alarm in her expression, and placed a comforting hand on hers. "I still have a couple of the mechanisms left from Valaris. They should deter any threats." He gently patted a pouch at his waist and flashed her a rare grin, sending a swell of calm through her. It would all be fine. This time tomorrow, they would be in Edgewater, at Philip's sister's farm, his childhood home. They would spend evenings on the porch overlooking the lake to the east, and have the reassuring sight of Spirefield's rain tower on the southern horizon. The Rain Tower. The reason they left Deadwood in the first place. The boom that shook the night still pierced her memory like a splinter. She remembered the sharp, cold air as she rushed out into the light of the full moon, scanning the horizon for the danger. The feeling of her stomach plummeting through the earth as her mind realized what had happened before she did. The tower, which stood above the walls like an arrow piercing the sky. The tower from where the rain, the lifeblood of the city, was called to ground. The tower that had sustained Deadwood for its entire history had fallen. Even now, in the back of the ramshackle cart, mist clinging to her skirts, it still felt like a dream. It was unbelievable that something so permanent, so integral to the lives of that many people, could be destroyed in an instant. Pola shook her head, dispersing her thoughts like a horse shaking off flies. Her family were with her. They had a plan. They were going to be okay. She snatched the reins from her yawning husband with a determined hand, flicked her wrist, and led them deeper into the moor.